Okay, going live now, Rick.
He henoria, he kōroria ki atua, he mangaronga ki te whenua, he whakarau pai kai nā, tangara katoa, hanga eta atua, he nākau hou, ki a roto, ki a tina o mātau, whakatongia ti wairua tapu, he a whina, he manaki, he tohu e a mātau, a rungia i ngā huarahi, nā a rua putu nara te rohi, he aki hoki i ngā mahi, i ngā rā, nā marama, nā tau, e heki mai ana. Āmene. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Regional Transport Committee meeting. And at this stage, I would like to welcome you all, let you know that we are, if you didn't know or you didn't get the message, just come in, we are live streaming. If you're not happy, you may let us know, please. Before you let us, Mel has told us what's happening. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking, and if you wish to speak, raise your hand, or happily to have your hand up like that would be great, thanks. And if you're presenting, it would be easier if you could share your own screen, please. Thank you very much. And I think we have everybody on now. So I would like to move to item 2 and call for apologies. We have one from Jackie Hori Holt and Greg Martin's apology. Are there any other apologies, please? Welcome, Kelly. I see you there. No other apologies. Can I have a mover from the RTC elected members, please? Thanks, Phil. And a seconder? I will second. Anybody against that motion? Thank you, carried. I'm now moving to item 3, declarations of conflicts of interest. We will take those as we go per item. Thank you. So item 4.1 on page 4, Regional Transport Committee minutes. Can I have a mover for those as being a true and correct record, please, of who was here? So that would be Anne, Steve, or David, or myself. I will move then. Can I have a seconder, please? Steve, thank you. Anybody, any items for discussion in those minutes that will not be covered in the rest of the meeting? I don't see any hands up. I will move those minutes. All those in favour? Nobody against? Thank you. I'm now moving on to item 4.2, receipt of the action sheet. So I would like a mover for the receipt of the action sheet, please. David's moving it. I'll second it. Thank you. So now I'm going on to page.
Question.
I'm going on to the action sheet. Okay, I'm on page 10 of the, so that is the first page of the action sheet. And I just did want to make a note that items 2 and 8 are the same. So if we could take those 2 items as the same, I'm hoping that we can progress a number of these items today. So I would like to start with 2, which is the same as item 8, and I will ask Victoria to, are you happy to talk through these, Victoria? They're not actually that big on my screen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Through the chair.
Just trying to have a look. Okay, that's a bit better. Right, thank you.
Yep, okay, so items 2 and 8 are in relation to the Auditor General's report on maintaining state highways through the network outcomes contracts, and we've had a discussion in a workshop around this, so if the committee was happy to mark those as complete.
Unless there's any objection, we will accept everybody. If everybody's happy, we will just move on down that. If anybody's not happy with Victoria's suggestion, we will vote on that individual item. So if we're happy with 2 and 8, we'd like to move on to 5, please.
Question through you, Mr. Chair. Given that we had a workshop this morning and given that that was confidential to the committee members, what is the opportunity now, if this is removed from the action sheet, to follow up on the actions that were discussed at the workshop?
So following the workshop, this item, if there's any action from it, it will come up at the next, as an item in the next RTC meeting for discussion and vote. There was an action on that paper.
Is that coming to the next workshop?
Yes.
Or the next RTC?
Next RTC.
Thank you.
That was the discussion we had. Any actions would be listed as items in the next RTC meeting. Thank you. Okay, Victoria, if you carry on with item 5.
Yeah, so we had a meeting with the Labour MPs go on, Rick, because the chair has, feedback.
Yes, we did have a meeting with the MPs and we discussed these items and we have not heard back from the MPs yet. As soon as we hear back, I will circulate the correspondence from the MPs on these, on the questions that we asked at the meeting we had with them a couple of weeks ago, and I will circulate those answers to elected members. Thank you. We have not heard back as yet.
Question, Chair.
Yes.
On this item, is it possible to receive a written follow-up report on what was asked and what the response is, and that be an agenda item for consideration in the future? Thank you. Yes,
I'll definitely follow that up with a written. I'm expecting a written reply. We have asked for one, and I will forward it on. Thank you.
Action item number 7, Wakakotai to send the report relating to recent fatal crash in Kaipara district to Councillor Wills. Just an update on the progress of that.
So you're asking,
so that
we received that, are you?
That report is still in progress. As soon as it's complete, we'll send it through to Councillor Wills.
Thank you. Just moving on to action item 9 then. So this is a discussion regarding the sustainability of the funding model moving forward through the NLTP. So that's something we raised to be workshopped, and that can be workshopped in the June workshop.
So are all elected members happy with that? We are going to raise this as a workshop item in the next workshop before the RTC meeting. That is the plan. Right.
Action item 12. So in the current RTC agenda for this meeting, we have an item around the findings into the inquiry of the 2019 driver licensing system. So hopefully that item will be completed today.
Thank you. So you're happy with that? Councillor Court, that will go. We've got that coming up. We should deal with it then. Thank you. So I'm moving on to the next page now. Item 17.
Yep. So page 11, item 17. There's an agenda item in today's committee meeting to undertake around the 4-laning. So that was a request made to undertake a review of the cost of 4-laning. This particular item in today's meeting addresses the 4-laning and the progress moving forward. So that may be completed today, but maybe we'll wait till the end of the meeting. Action item 20.
Question on that, please, Chair.
Yes.
So I take the committee back to the minutes of 11 August, where I tabled a report, and the minutes refer to this as proposal for production of an indicative economic and delivery business case into the proposed 4-laning of State Highway 1 between Marsden Point and Whangarei. It was moved by myself. It was seconded by member Willis. And in that we sought 3 items: that the report proposal for production of an indicative economic and delivery business case into the proposed 4-laning of State Highway 1 between Marsden Point and Whangarei by Chris Powell, Transport Manager, be received. that the Regional Land Transport Committee instigate the production of an indicative economic and deliverability business case into the proposed 4-laning of State Highway 1 from Marsden Point to Whangarei, and that the Regional Land Transport Committee obtain a quote to undertake a review of the proposed 4-laning of State Highway 1 between Marsden Point and Whangarei, this to be presented at the next Northland Forward Together strategic planning workshop to determine the next steps. So unfortunately, due to a snafu, that item was not taken to the Northland Forward strategic planning workshop, which was held last week, but the other items on that resolution remain unsatisfied at this point, and simply receiving a report and the agenda does not give effect to the resolution as stated.
Right. So so what would you like to do with this, Councillor Court, at the moment?
Mr. Chair, the resolution is quite clear that the Regional Land Transport Committee sought a quote to undertake a review of the cost of the proposed 4-laning of State Highway 1 between Marsden Point and Whangarei. Now, I do understand that the Regional Land Transport Committee have no budget, and so this item is stagnating currently at the NTA, which was the purpose of taking it to Northland Forward Together. It has been to both the Mayoral Forum and the Chief Executives Forum, but at the moment it remains unsatisfied. So we need to leave it on the action sheet until such time as it is satisfied and we receive a report from staff outlining how we can advance this. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Very happy with that. I see Kelvin's got his hand up. Thank you, Kelvin.
I'll just figure out my camera, sorry. Through the chair, just an update on that. As a result of last week's meetings, the 4 chief executives have been in correspondence regarding the way forward, noting Councillor Court's comment that the RTC has no delegated budget authority, which is part of the reason it's remained stagnant. I understand that there should be an update provided back to the Mayoral Forum on the next steps to progress this in the coming weeks, but agree with Councillor Court that it should remain as an action point.
Thank you. So we're happy with that, Councillor Court? Perfect. So we will keep that item on there. Thank you. Victoria, now moving on to item 20.
Yep, if I could just receive an update from Calvin as to the discussion. Is that a complete item?
Through the chair, not sure if this has got to Councillor Wills, but we provided an update to the External Funding Committee that Wakatahi have confirmed that those 2 bridges that were referenced are included in the current 3-year program for funding.
You hadn't received that, Councillor Wills? You had received it. Okay, thank you. So,
no, sorry, Chair. No, I have not received it. I'm sorry. I thought you asked if I'd think. No, I didn't receive the report.
Okay.
So just to clarify, are we expecting a formal report, or is the verbal update of confirmation sufficient, Councillor Wills?
We can move on. Thank you, Calvin. Appreciate it.
So you're happy with the verbal report? That's okay? Thank you. Okay, we can move on, Victoria.
Yep, so action item 21 was workshopped. So the proposed mode share programs rejected and how the RTC can address this moving forward. How would the committee like to proceed?
Right. So we have received the report. We have workshopped it. We have a action coming up for the next RTC. Are we happy with that? I'm happy with that. Councillor Court, I see nodding your head. Councillor Wills, are you happy if we take this as a paper to the next RTC? That was the agreement from the workshop. Okay.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Holster said that as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right. Thanks very much. That's worked. That is what we discussed. That has worked out well. Thank you. We can move on now.
Action item 25. So the NTA to include the forecast expenditure in the next meeting agenda, which has been now included into the funding uptake agenda item on an ongoing basis. Would the
Thank you very
committee
much.
like to mark that as complete?
Thank you. Everybody happy with that? Anybody against? No, everybody's happy with that. Thank you. Right. Next one, please. 26.
Yep. Action item 26. So a Waka Kotahi update on the roadworks planned at the Uratiti area. It's not started, it says, but if Steve would like to give us an update on.
Yeah, I don't have an update on that at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
So that will stand. Thank you. Item 27.
Is completed, and action item 28, so the speed limit review process, which was included in our workshop. So it's currently in progress.
Thank you. Yes, more than happy with those. Any further questions on the action plan? Thank you. Anybody against accepting the action plan? I am now moving on to item 5.1 on page 12, Northland Regional Land Transport Plan, funding uptake. Could I have I will move that. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Anne. And now I will hand over for Chris for any comments before we go to questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, we'll take the report as read. There are the normal reports that we put up at each meeting. However, there have been some changes, hopefully to make it a bit easier for the members to go through. You will notice that in the column of probability of uptaking the funding, we have included, I don't want to say a traffic light system because that might show connotations to national problems, but we've included a color coding which will give a better indication of the certainty of uptaking the funding, green being high, orange moderate, and red is low. What you will also see is that we now have in there, sorry, I'll just get my sheet here. We have two separate sections. One is the regional strategic objectives being met. Second one is the regional priorities being met. If you cast your mind back to when we put together the regional land transport plan, and we sat down as a committee and we looked at all the strategic objectives and the priorities that we wanted for Northland, and we based the RLTP around that. These two sections now include what they were and how each project is going to be working towards meeting those objectives. This will also give us a better footing at the end of the financial year when we report back on the year's expenditure and how we've met what we wanted to get out of the RLTP. So that will give everyone a better indication. So that's all from me, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions.
Thank you, and we all appreciate the detail. Definitely appreciate the detail, Chris, and we won't, I'm not sure if what we call it, we'll just call it colouring. We appreciate the colouring. Thank you. It's definitely much easier to understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We don't want to get confused with national initiatives. Thank you. So, do I see any hands up? Thank you on those. Thank you again, Chris. And any hands? Always great to receive this report. So thank you very much. So anybody against receiving this report? Thank you. I'm now moving on to item 6.1, Waka Kotahi's Northland Activity and Funding Update on page 17. Could I have a mover for receiving this report, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you. And Phil seconding and Councillor Hull seconding. Thank you. And now I will hand back to Steve for any comment. Thank you. Before we go to questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll just bring up an update that I have for the activity for. So I'm just having a little technical problem here at the moment. Sorry.
It's all right.
So as normal, as per other RTC meetings, I'll run through a presentation which provides you with an update not only of regional Northland issues, but also looking at national initiatives, to get everyone up to speed on what Waka Kotahi is focusing on. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We do have it on our screen. We do have it in the agenda.
Yep.
But it'd be much easier to run off your screen. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a bit of an update on our focus in 2022. Waka Kotahi is very busy at the moment. And I'll go through in a little bit more detail on some of these topics as I go through the presentation. First of all, we're reviewing our land transport revenue, which is being led by the Ministry of Transport. We're all looking forward to the emissions reduction plan that the government will release in May, which will enable us to update our emission reduction adaptation strategy. We're also implementing the One Network framework, which I'll talk about shortly, and also forging ahead with the government's Road to Zero initiatives. We're doing all that as well as delivering on our NLTP commitments. And also, we've actually started our planning towards our 2024-27 NLTP developments. I put that on the slide pack. That's just basically our compass for Waka Kotahi, our te kapuhi. So this is really shaping us in terms of where we're going in terms of an organisation. So first of all, the Ministry of Transport and Finance are overseeing an 18-month-long review of the land transport revenue system ahead of the next GPS, which is going to be launched in 2024, ahead of the next NLTP. So the gap between demands on the NLTF to deliver the GPS and the available revenue led to a late decision, if you remember, just before this NLTP, where we got a top-up with a Crown loan of $2 billion. So the current revenue for the NLTF comes from fuel exercise duty and road user charges, both of which have been impacted by transport mode shift, electric vehicles, and of course, COVID-19. And the aim is to have a sustainable land transport revenue system that's capable of delivering this next NLTP, but also repaying that $2 billion Crown loan and some other loans that we have in place. So we are working really closely with the Ministry of Transport, Treasury, and other government agencies to make sure we have a sustainable land transport fund in the future. So I know that the Minister is looking at some short-term initiatives to help progress this. But as I say, the 18 months review is in place. We're looking at a new regulatory funding model. Currently most of our fees and charges don't reflect the current cost to provide our regulatory services. So therefore proposing a number of changes to our operating funding, to the road user fees and charges, and funding for our regulatory services. So this model will mean that New Zealanders will meet the cost of regulation fairly. I think it's come quite clear from some of the reviews that we've been undertaking in the last couple of years, is that we do not have a sustainable funding model to regulate our system properly. So what this means for councils is that the data on the motor vehicle and driver licensing registers, that they can be assessed by commercial users and councils. So therefore there will be a cost associated with accessing some of these databases. Plus we're reviewing the fees and charges to make driver license and testing much more accessible and affordable. And also looking at other parts of the regulatory system and getting those people who use the system the most, get them to contribute to their fair use of it. So we are meeting councils about our proposals and the possible impacts, and I know that they're scheduled in with some of your chief executives. But changes are coming to the transport system to reflect the vital role transport plays as part of the government strategy to reduce emissions. And so, as mentioned earlier, that we're really looking forward to seeing the target to be finalised in May 2022. And changes to the government policy statement on land transport may be needed to align future investment decisions with this emissions strategies, policies and actions. So I think we'll hold this over and have a deep dive in this RTC once the government's emissions reduction plan is released. We've talked a lot about our public awareness campaign, and I know that it's getting mixed reactions throughout the region. And we're really looking at 3 phases here. One's around disrupt, where we want to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our roads, and our plan is to get there as road to zero. We put a vision out there, and it might seem aspirational, but 0 is the only acceptable number. And from a system perspective, we all have a part to play, and it takes everyone to get to know one, including us as leaders in our community. So we've worked really closely with our key partners and stakeholders, including the New Zealand Police, Ministry of Transport, ACC, WorkSafe, Auckland Transport and local government. And the aim is to get people invested in road safety initiatives in their communities. And I know we've had some good conversations about this, and I think it is starting to have an interest in the community with people with their different views. So one of the goals is for the campaign to get everyone to support the initiatives in your region, including with the safety review. So this campaign's digital, so there's access on our internet webpage where you can access videos and other campaign resources that are there for your use. This is one topic, the One Network framework, that we're very interested in as a regional transport committee, and we've got an action to take this to a workshop. But every RCA, including Wakakatahi, has now classified their network using the movement and place street categories. So this framework shifts how we think about, how we plan and invest in our roads and streets by putting people in the diverse ways we use our roads and streets at the heart of everything that we do and how we plan. So using the framework, we can classify both the movement and place function of roads and streets. So this links transport more clearly with land use and the people present and how they're travelling around the region. So this framework replaces the One Network road classification, which has been used since 2012. So in 2021, we've worked to integrate the One Network framework into our policy and processes, including strategic planning, investment, technology, and safety. And there is another step that we're taking now, which is to classify the public transport routes, the freight, the walking and cycling paths, and general traffic alongside a future function view of the network. So this is really going to be a one snapshot of the whole region in terms of One Network framework, which I think is really exciting. So I think over the next 18 months, our focus is to get the RTC members up to speed around this, because our focus is to integrate the framework into all our systems and processes, so that informs the network operating frameworks, the asset management planning, the long-term plans, and the RLTP and NLTP investment. So I think having this at our next meeting is quite timely. So speed management programs. So we're introducing a new framework for speed management to improve how to implement changes that will help save lives. So we are reviewing the New Zealand Speed Management Guide, and the changes reflect that roads and streets are destinations for people as well as transport corridors, and that our roads and streets have different functions for different modes, all of which impact the right speed for that road. So the guide will reflect the Road to Zero strategy and action plan and the changes to the rule and to the One Network framework. So this national speed limit register will make it easier for us to record, update and share speed limit data so that we can make informed decisions about what safe speeds are needed in our communities. So we are working through requirements for a speed management planning solution. This will help to set standard speed management plans across the regions, enable us to coordinate the plan development process. And work is underway to update Mega Maps, which is an online mapping tool, which provides lots and lots of information, and it's in line with the release of the guide and the new land transport rule going into force. So these Mega Maps will show roads across the country, detailed transport information and crash data. So it's going to be a useful tool that the Regional Transport Committee ability to use. And once it's up and running, we'll definitely have a session to show you how to use that. So safety camera transfer and expansion, it's part of the Tackling Unsafe Speeds package, and it is transferring from the New Zealand Police over to Waka Kotahi in mid next year. So safety cameras will discourage excessive speeds, they'll improve compliance with posted speed limits and reduce deaths and serious injuries on our network. So we're allowing these safety cameras will not only do speed, but there is an opportunity to get them to look at those people who are talking on their cell phone, who are distracted and also not wearing seatbelts. So look, we're working really well with the police around to get this transfer in place. As I say, it'll be from mid-2023, and we're working to identify the first 100 sites for the expansion of the safety camera network. And we're really interested to hear from people about, where we think or where they think that these should go in Northland. Just an update around the vehicle safety rating update. So this is something that we've been really focused on, is to get the Right Car website updated with the latest vehicle safety ratings. And we've also put in the carbon emission values has also been included. And we're starting to get really good feedback around this website where people are starting to look to buy or purchase safer cars. We've recently surveyed 1,600 New Zealanders to gauge the public attitudes on speed, enforcement, vehicle safety, driver fatigue, impairment, distraction, and other things around Road to Zero and Vision Zero. So from a results snapshot, 4 in 5 respondents consider our roads to be at least fairly safe to travel or are similar to previous years. More respondents agree than disagree that using safety cameras helps to reduce road deaths than disagree. And 1 in 2 drivers know the star safety rating of the car they usually drive, but typically those who know the rating of their car report they drive a 4 to 5 star car. Public awareness of Road to Zero is low at 15%, and fewer than 1 in 5 think it is likely that no road deaths can be achieved by the year 2050, which is this government's vision. And there's high levels of support for potential safety initiatives, including roadside drug testing, high fines for mobile phone use, and increased installation of wire rope median barriers on rural roads. So you can read the full report online, which is on our website. So just moving into some of the regional activities that we have in Northland. So we're really focused on improving safety between Auckland and Whangarei, and the current safety improvements that we have are focusing between Whangarei to Wellsford. So first of all, we have a central section. There's 3 sections, so northern, central and southern. So just quickly talk about the central section. So that's between the roundabout there you can see out to Port Marsden and between the north side of the Brynduans. We're currently refining and developing our detailed design based on the feedback that we received from the Waipu community. We're doing some surveying, geotechnical, ecological and other investigative works, either beginning or being scheduled to commence. We're also currently having introduction conversations with adjacent landowners and affected communities about how the project will progress. So some planned early works we're looking at for this year, and the project will include going forward wider centre lines and a section of flexible median barriers and side safety barriers, which is really good for the safety of people using that corridor. So on the southern section, which is between the southern side of the Brynduans and through to Wellsford, we're currently refining and developing the detailed design, and we're having initial discussions with key stakeholders. And the planned works for this year include some smaller sections for centre lines, a section of flexible median barrier and improved lane marking and signage, which will be well received on that part of the corridor. From the north end, which is between the roundabout you can see and through to into Whangarei. So we're now rescoping the project after the government decided not to proceed with the 4-lane of the highway. So early planning work is underway and the safety improvements proposed for this section. And all the work that we did as part of the 4-laning project will inform this, and more information will be coming shortly. So in terms of the safety projects on this particular stretch, which I just referred to, This is after the government instructed Uptake to implement a new option that focuses on the safety improvements along the existing corridor. We're absolutely focused on the safety improvements, which is somewhere between 150 and 250 million. So we're still working through what that looks like based on the information that we did in the initial business case. But the government's absolutely committed to investing broadly similar to the previous announcement for Northland, which is about 700 million, of which 450 to 550 million will be on the new rail link and the upgrades north. So we did receive feedback from the community on safety improvements along this corridor, and I think that it was overwhelming around that because the deaths and serious crashes on that stretch of highway ahead on, there was real support for barriers, centerline barriers around there to make sure that people driving that corridor remain safe. Also a lot of feedback around widening the footpath to create a shared path in the urban section to obviously reduce the conflict that we have with vulnerable users and traffic. So we are inputting all that work into a business case, which we are looking to deliver to the ministers later this year around the scope, cost and timing. So speed reviews for Northland. So we're currently still progressing on the reviews of the speed limits in Tito Tokoro and Tamaki Makaurau. And our vision is obviously to have an Aotearoa where no one is killed or seriously injured on our roads. We've listened to feedback and we're considering it carefully alongside all our technical assessments. And we will be coming out over the coming months with a consultation for stakeholders to see what we were proposing to take forward. So expect that in the coming months. Just an update on a couple of projects. So first of all, the Kaia Bridge upgrade, great progress is happening here where we're looking to build a new 2-lane bridge and completed in 2024. This photo here is of a temporary road which has been built to get the traffic off the existing state highway. That's actually completed now. In fact, I travelled on it yesterday, and there's a traffic light system getting people across the existing bridge and on this new road that's been formed. There's been a lot of work here to protect the wildlife, which has been really, really good to see by the project team. Loop road safety improvements, like many projects, experienced delays due to the ongoing COVID pandemic response. There's been lengthy lockdown periods, and also the delivery of construction materials has been challenging. Also, the impact that the borders had on the scheduled program of work. So the final layer of asphalt between the Lookout Hill and Loop Road roundabout was laid pre-Christmas, and the work was carried out at night works to minimise disruptions for the community. Work was then paused over Christmas and the New Year to enable holiday traffic to flow more freely. The remaining completion work for this stage 1, including the road surfacing and traffic light installation, is scheduled to be completed later this year. But we have identified an issue with the surfacing on that northern end of the site, which was laid early in 2021. And this is such a critical part of the network. So it's really important that we take time to understand why that has occurred and to make sure that we've got the right remedy going forward. So we're pretty confident that we're got a good understanding of that now. So we're looking to complete the work later this year. Just from a maintenance and operations perspective, we're currently 60% through our program and our pavement and resurfacing program. And the work that we were focused on, a lot of feedback that we received around the condition of the network, we secured some additional funding and we're 46% complete and getting a lot of the work done, especially around the scabbing, which is that photo there where you can see some work's being done to resolve some of those large areas where the top layer has scabbed, one for a better word. So yeah, as I say, 5 of the larger sites have been completed, which is great. The others will be completed in the next construction season. In terms of the last slide that I have here, this is the snapshot of our 1-year forecast and actual, our baseline against our forecast. So I think there's a really good story to tell here. So first of all, you can see state highway maintenance, where we are baseline forecast. We're actually forecasting higher than our baseline or our budget. And the reason for that is we secured some additional funding for maintenance operation to focus on those points that I just talked about, our call to action, where we've gone around and addressing a lot of the surfacing issues that customers do see as they're traveling around the network. In terms of the state highway improvements, we're forecasting lower than our budget. That is due to the ongoing impacts we've had around COVID, but we're confident that we can recover this over the 3-year period. So even though we're under forecast this year, we'll do a catch up in the next 2 years. And also in the walking and cycling improvements as well, that's particularly being held up with some COVID impacts, but also phasing in terms of the projects. So as you can see there, we're forecasting slightly lower than our budget, but we're confident to recover that over the coming period. And the remaining slides that are in the pack are around detailed activity updates on all the projects that are happening around Northland. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Look, that was a very comprehensive report and a lot of information in it. I know a lot of information goes to the public. I certainly congratulate you on the One Network framework, combining it all. And I'm not sure if the community is fully aware of all those programs. They're certainly aware of the Road to Zero. Not so sure about whether the full network program is out there publicly. And I comment you on the detail for our local projects, because I drive that road every day, and it is frustrating. And I look at your last graph actually, and it said that the money's not available for those improvements. So that is a bit of a worry, but that is not. I know that is not Wakakatahi's fault. It is a government decision. So I know you're trying to do the best with what you've got, but it seems to be decreasing all the time. I'm sure there'll be some other comments from the others. Anne's hand is up, so I'll go to her first.
Just remove my hand. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yes. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions and some observations. So I think hashtag while you were sleeping is going to be my new favourite meme. Because let me start again. This week I've spent considerable amount of time online following all the links that have appeared in all of the reports that come before this committee, and it seems to me there's an awful lot of work going on which is happening at a level that this community and this committee are not engaged in. And I start off with, in the agenda, I noted Wakakatahi's focus in 2022 includes reviewing land transport revenue with the Ministry of Transport. So I made a note, what is involved in this process, and what part of the review has the Minister called for, and where are we in this conversation? And Steve just expanded on that. He's talked about the first tranche of the review, which has been undertaken by the Minister, will be completed in August 2022. And yet I don't believe anybody in this meeting today has eyes on what that looks like. And yet we contribute 40% of the funds into the transport task in Northland. So I just raise that as a point that, in the spirit of partnership, where is local government New Zealand in these conversations? We saw when the Minister introduced the New Zealand upgrade program that we were not at the table. And equally, we saw when the Minister reprioritised the New Zealand upgrade program, and in doing so removed the 4-laning project from Northland, that the only partner they included at the table was Kiwi Rail, who have no skin in the game in the roading corridor whatsoever. So I'm just raised that as an important point that we need to be included. Then the next item in the agenda was updating the emissions reduction and adaptation strategy. And the notes that I had is that the government is intending to push out the first emissions reduction plan, setting out its policies and strategies for meeting emissions budgets by 31 May. And the very last item that we've got in the agenda today is a paper on reviewing the road user charges system, which is entirely premised on the outcomes of the emissions reduction plan, which is yet to be fully completed and yet to be published. And then Waka Kotahi go on to say that as part of their priorities that they will be adjusting the national adaptation plan, but we don't even know what the reduction plan looks like in the first instance. And given that these, by Waka Kotahi's own admission, will have a significant impact on the NLTP and the budgets, as we've observed already, why are we not at the table as part of these conversations? Steve talked about the Northland Safety Project. As an aside, Kiwi Rail and Waka Kotahi are still working on the business case. So we had a business case for four-laning. A decision was made to transfer our money to rail with no business case, and they're still working on the business case, and they are collectively working on what the Northland Safety Package looks like. So again, I ask, where are the Northland leaders in this conversation? We had a workshop this morning, and it's confidential, so I'm not going to break confidentiality, but we talked about the One Network framework. And I'm going to send you all the PowerPoint later so that you're aware of what the One Network framework is in its completeness. But it talks about a total holistic look at the transport task. It talks about the classification of your road, it talks about mode share, it talks about form and shape of our communities, and it talks about growth and route resilience. We have not been at the table in any conversations that I'm aware of on the development of the One Network framework for Northland. It may have happened at a technical officer level, but it hasn't happened at a political level. And why is this important? This is really important because I go back to the road user charges paper, where there are a number of assumptions made in there that we're all going to be driving less. And yet the government's own Ministry of Transport Outlook Future State report says that the freight task is predicted to increase to more than 55% by 2042, from 237 million tonnes to 366 million tonnes. And for Northland, our freight task is predicted to increase by 40% to 6.6% of the total freight task. So I've heard that our funding and the levels of service that we receive are related to the One Network framework, where we automatically get a lower level of service because we don't have the traffic volumes. But the traffic volumes are coming, and no one's got their eyes on what the traffic volumes look like in the future as we move forward into that space. So I'm very, very concerned that these conversations all seem to be happening in isolation from a national picture about what the transport task looks like in New Zealand. And to give you some context, there's 90,000 kilometres of road in New Zealand and 3,700 kilometres of rail. So any suggestion that rail is going to take trucks off our road is romantic idealism at its best. So we're having all of these conversations about investing in rail, and rail has an important role to play in mode share. It's important that we connect the Port of Whangarei to the Port of Auckland, but it is not going to take trucks off our road, and we're not planning for the big picture. So I'm really concerned that when I sit down and I get these reports, our role as a regional land transport committee is to advocate on behalf of the needs of Northland. And yet we're not being included in these conversations, and we don't have eyes on these conversations. And unless you've got hours and hours to spend by reading every single report that comes out, we're missing these conversations. We're missing being involved in the emissions reduction conversation and the impact that it's going to have on our network and our funding. We're missing an action when the government has conversations with Kiwi Rail about taking money off our network and investing it in rail. We're missing an action when the government is calling for a review on how funding is collected and spent on the network in this country, when we've got 40% of the money coming from our ratepayers, we are hashtag while we were sleeping. So that's quite a speech, and I've got to keep my speech under 10 minutes, but I'm concerned, Chair, that we have a very structured Regional Land Transport Committee, and we are not being ahead of the game and being aware of the shift in national direction and conversations and the impact that it's going to have on our ability to deliver the mode share that Northlanders need today and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, and I definitely agree. We all share your frustration. We discussed it. We mentioned it last week. We are, I should say, Northlanders are at guilt as well, because it did not go to that mayoral forum. We are also, we've got to be aware though that we as Waka Kotahi are dealt a hand that we've got to deal with. So some of those things are beyond our control. We can certainly be involved more in the discussion. I totally agree with that. But some of those, if you like, those decisions are way beyond our control. So we can certainly stick out for ourselves. And I fully support that we should do that more. I absolutely agree with you. The way forward, I think perhaps you and I, Anne, should take this offline and discuss an approach forward with this, because you've brought it up many times and we don't seem to be getting anywhere with it. So I would be interested in Steve's reply, but I also feel that you and I need to, or the four of us perhaps, council representatives here, need to discuss it a little bit further and see what we can do. So Steve, I'll let you reply and then go to Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just support the comments that you've made, Chair. It's important that we, as an RTC, sit down and look at the future around this. Some of these aspects, Waka Kotahi are also wanting to see the government's climate change action report, because that enables us to manage the work that we need to undertake as well. So I absolutely support your comments.
Thank you. Phil.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I just want to commend Councillor Court for bringing up and saying what she did. You know, that's the total failure of Northland at the moment, is we're not strong enough in our voice. And just going back to the rail to Marsden Point, and I know that area probably as good as anyone in the room or anyone connected to this talk. The original business case for the rail was 1.1 when the threshold was 5. And they've been trying for the last 40 years to try and make it fit. But the point I want to come back to is, unless we scrutinise, as Councillor Court mentioned, yeah, we're going to have massive blowouts in the rail to Northport. You know, I lived in that area. I know the ground conditions. I know the size of the embankments they're trying to make. The present budget is so far underestimated, it's unreal. You know, like, this is the trouble, you know, like that loop roundabout took so much money out of the rest of Northland roading developments. Had it come in on an original budget, we would have had another $20 million to spend on our next 3 or 4 jobs. So we've got to really scrutinise. Our job is to scrutinise this part of the district's roading. And Anne Court has brought up a good point. You know, unless we stand up and be very firm of what we want, you know, we're going to be played, and Waka Kotahi can just go away. Or we had a meeting last week, nothing come out of it. So we've got to have a plan where something does come out of it. And you know, the scrutiny is beyond belief. You know, like everything is delayed so long now. So we get a proposal. By the time we get funding, by the time we do the planning, get the funding, 6 or 7 years ago, the whole personnel go out of here. And out of all the people, I've just gone through the list of people involved here. There's 3 people who are involved when I was been 6 years on the Regional Land Transport Committee. You know, none of the politicians were there. You know, the Waka Kotahi guys, but the same messages are brought up back then, that we have to get on top of this, because we are the part of like the state highway network. It starts Cape Reinga and goes to Bluff. Our standard of the road should be as good as any in the country, and we shouldn't have to put up with speed limits to correct bad roading. You know, what is wrong with Waka Kotahi when the road between Hamilton and Cambridge is 110 k's, and we're reduced down to 80k up here. It's because we're not standing up and doing our job as politicians, and we need to put more heat on the people who are making decisions. But more importantly, whatever money is allocated to us, we make sure we get our dollar value for every dollar we spend. Currently, I don't think we're getting that. I think we're getting about 50 cents in the dollar. So that's where we've got to scrutinise. We've got to make major improvements, and we just got to stop some of this nonsense that's going on. So thank you. Thank you.
And I think we're all frustrated, but I do just still want to reiterate we must make the difference between what Waka Kotahi has been tasked with doing and what the money has been allocated for, and that is not what we accepted at the beginning. It's changed. We've got to definitely raise our voice, but we are, if you like, we're shooting the messenger now. So we need to get together and formulate our plan forward. So I agree with you, Phil, that we do need a plan forward. And I, like I said before, I think we need to sit down and nut out a plan that we can progress this forward. So that's an action point that I think we will need to do. We will need to discuss further. And Steve is backing that up. So I thank you for that, Steve. And we will work on an action plan forward, and have said that, I promise we will do something. We will have some action going forwards. Okay, so thank you for bringing it up, and your points are definitely noted, and your concerns are all our concerns, and we need to actually produce a plan that is workable. And I do thank Phil for his comments, because this is his first meeting, and I forget how many years ago you're on it, Phil, but you're on it for a while. So thank you for that. So are there any other questions on this? No other questions?
Sorry, Chair. It's David here.
Yep, way you go.
I did ask them before the meeting, but I'd like them recorded. I did ask for a breakdown of that allocation of funding for that railway between the spur to the port and the funding for the Aotearoa extension, as brought forward by the Council of Hulse, that when it's indicated that they haven't even completed the land purchases yet, there's a lot of money still to go. And we could be talking at the start of a project like this, we're looking for what, 5 or 10 years out. So it really is not just the transference of the funds, it's also having extended the use of those funds by the government out another 5 or 10 years from the stage we were at with the 4-lane highway, where we'd already started that public consultation and we were moving further ahead. The discussion raised, and I support the previous comments, but Waka Kotahi are only delivering what they're told to deliver, and maybe our focus should be on the purse providers rather than the purse deliverers. And for example, our involvement with the local MPs as a representative of the government, of the current government, should that be where we should be focusing some of our concerns, or inviting them to participate or be involved? I'm just asking because we seem to. Steve's doing the best he can to deliver what he's asked to do on behalf of Waka Kotahi, but we can hammer away at him as much as we like, but he's only going to deliver what he's allowed to deliver. Sorry, that's not to reduce your role to being a messenger only, but I hope you appreciate maybe we should be directing our concerns at a different level, and that's actually at the fund providers.
Thank you, David. I'm just writing a reply to Anne's note, actually, but I'll say it, Anne. First of all, David, remember I did meet with the MPs, have met with the Northland Regional Council, and these questions were brought up on behalf of the RTC, and we still have not got a reply. But once we do, I will forward it to the RTC members, and they were around. And as Councillor Court asked, those questions and answers will be circulated. And in terms of your question, and my reply was going to be, I would like to get together with you and we nut out a plan along the lines that you have discussed for a way forward. So we will, and I will ask Victoria to note that we get together and do that. How does that sound?
Thank you, Rick. I just want to clarify that at no stage am I having a crack at Steve or Wakatoa. And I was very careful with my words. What I am saying is that the government is moving at a rapid pace. There are a number of strategic arms at play here, which we do not have collective oversight of, and each one impacts on us. So we need to be aware of all of how these strings are pulling at us and the impact that this will have on our network moving forward, because we're already in a position now where we can't fund what we need. So we need to be at the table as part of all of these conversations. So as a governance body, we have collective oversight and can contribute to that. Our job is to fight for what Northland needs, not to be apologists for Wellington and tell Northlanders what Wellington wants them to hear. We have a very specific role. We are answerable for that role at the poll, as is the minister. So we need to have those conversations on behalf of the nearly 200,000 people who live here, who expect us to be their voice. And I don't apologise for that. And if that's uncomfortable, well then so be it. My job is not always comfortable, but it's not a crack at any individual. And a lot of these conversations need to be had with the Crown, with our MPs, sometimes with Waka Kotahi, sometimes with the minister directly. Sorry.
Thank you. And I will definitely get together, Anne, and we'll nut out a plan forward. Dave, have you got another question?
Yeah, really quickly, thank you, Chair. To Councillor just speaking, I've never ever suggested you slow down, never. To Councillor Court, I encourage anything you can raise with a profile to improve what we're doing. I was not making apologising to anybody for our stance or my stance. I was just saying that maybe we need to direct it in a different direction to get some benefit out of it, because otherwise we'll end up 10 years later discussing, as Councillor Hulse discussed, something that was in place 10 years ago that still hasn't been resolved. And that's just reinventing the wheel for the hell of it. And I'm not really that good at that sort of thing. So I'm just asking, do we as a group or individually redirect our focus and our challenge rather than keeping it internally within this organised group? Thank you.
Thank you. And I will take those up with Anne, those comments, because I would like to get this sorted so we can have a way forward for the next meeting, or the next workshop at least. Right, thank you. Now I'm conscious of the time again. So are there any other questions? Anybody against receiving that report? I would like to move on to the next item. And I have in front of me item 6.2 on page 45. Waka Kotahi Designing Driver Licensing Strategy Report. I would like a mover for that. It was Anne. It was Anne's proposal from the action plan, so she has moved it. I'll second it. Steve, would you like to talk to it first, or just want to take questions? You want to talk to it first? Okay, away you go.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to it first, just quickly. Yeah. We're really focused on activities to improve the access to driver licensing system, particularly in Northland. And we're taking a multi-agency approach because we need to take a whole system view to make sure that we resolve the inequitable barriers that are in place. I think a key point here, I'll take the paper as read, but I think a key point here is that we've got a real focus in Te Tai Tokoro, that we're looking to run some pilots that we want to try out in Northland first to make sure that we can roll it out to other regions. And those solutions being considered include increasing testing officers in the right location, improving access to the driver testing and booking system, addressing language and literacy barriers, and improving access to learning and practice resources. And those changes that we will make will seek to improve the equity, enhance the safety of the whole system for the benefit of all New Zealanders. But in terms of the review of the graduated driver licensing system, we're still working with MOT around the options to progress the legislative changes that are required. And I think the paper clearly sets those things out. So I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I'll let you go first, Anne. It was your proposal in the first place.
I am having a complete senior moment here, so someone's going to have to help me out. What is the name of the gentleman that came up to Kaitaia to talk about driver's licensing? Can someone help me out there?
Was it Neil Cook or was it Kane?
Neil, thank you, Neil Cook. That's an embarrassing admission to make publicly that I couldn't remember his name, but I met Neil in Kirikiri, and he talked me through a trial that they're running in Kaitaia and Gisborne. The problem, there seems to be a bottleneck with qualified driving license, instructors, what do you call them, Steve? The people that test you.
Testers, yeah.
Yeah, so they're doing a trial in Kaitaia with REAP, and I came away, I was so inspired. I came straight home and I banged out this email and I sent it off to all my colleagues. This is an amazing initiative that if it plays out, will lead to some changes in the way the driver's licensing system is established in law in New Zealand. So I think we should all get behind that and support that. We know a driver's license is a pathway to employment and opportunity for people, our young people in Northland, and it's really, really exciting to be part of it. So while I've been handing out brickbats all morning, I think it's really important to hand out bouquets, and this is one where a big fat bouquet is needed to Waka Kote and Neil and everybody else who's been involved in this, and REAP, and watch the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Very good, and it was definitely good you persevering with it, and good to get the report and good to get the update. Thank you, Steve, and I'm pleased, and that it is a bouquet this time, so that's very good. Thank you, Phil.
Yes, just supporting Councillor Court. Really good report, and I fully support the recommendations. But we had an early discussion about road safety and the government's road to zero with the road deaths and road net. I wonder whether this type of initiative could be expanded a bit, where the actual government actually funds the defensive driving course as part of those new entrants getting their licenses, because we didn't have a generation of young people coming through really well equipped to handle conditions. And it's one thing, an investment like that would probably have more returns to the communities, and the word of mouth from doing something like that would be really, really positive. So I think if we could expand it out to make sure that anyone who's getting a driver's license have an opportunity to do a course like that would be great. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Good idea. And this has come up before, government funded for those things. I think we're making notes of that, so we will see what we can follow up with that. Thank you. And thank you again, Steve. Any further questions on that report? Anybody against receiving that? I'm now moving on to 6.3, the 4-laning highway update on page 48, and I would like to move that, and I would like a second. David, have you got a question about the previous one? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, no, I'll get there. So, Chair, you have to allow for someone that's slightly older than you. It takes us longer to get to the reaction button. On that last one, it mentioned that the regions that they're going to be assessed. It doesn't say that there's actually an outcome for Northland. Is that correct?
Right, I'll leave that to Steve.
The reason I asked that question is my daughter, who's a university graduate, ended up getting her full driver's license in Greymouth. It's just a practical outcome, because trying to get a booking even near Whangarei was near impossible without committing months ahead. So I just mentioned that she went to a little town on the west coast to actually get her license. That's a real outcome of the current system.
That's right, and we're very aware of those people who are making the choice to travel throughout New Zealand to go to other areas, and that does not provide equity in the system. It's not available to all people. So that's one of the things we're absolutely addressing, is to make the driver licensing system more accessible to all New Zealanders in the regions that they live. That's really important. So look, we are running this pilot in Northland because we want it to succeed in Northland first, and the learnings that we take from that will then be rolled out nationally.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Wills, that I missed your hand going up. So thank you. I think we've answered that question. I moved it. Do I have a seconder for 6.3, please? Thank you, Phil. Seconder for 6.3. So now the 4-lane highway. If again, Steve, if you'd like to talk to it before we take questions. I think we've had a lot of discussion on this in the past. We do need to set the scene that it was not Waka Kotahi's decision to remove that funding. So I think we've got to accept that and realise that they are working with what they have. And we have discussed the amount that has been made available. So happy for you, Steve, to talk to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read. As you say, we've talked about it a lot. I think just one point that I'd like to make very clear is that this is a New Zealand upgrade program project. Now, the government invested an additional 6.8 billion nationally to help stimulate the economy as a result of the COVID. This is not or does not have any funding associated with it from the NLTF or the NLTP. So this is purely government funding. So therefore it does not take any other work away from Northland from a funding perspective. So that's just one, the key point that I'd like to make. And as I mentioned earlier in my wider update, the joint ministers are looking to give Waka Kotahi some guidance. In March, it's just gone, so we're just waiting for that guidance to come back, and we're expecting to put a final business case in, which includes the Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail work back in mid-2022 to progress the project.
So just to confirm that, so before either project moves ahead, both projects have to be signed off by the relevant ministers together.
That's correct.
And that, I guess, Councillor Wills, when we'll find out the allocation of that funding as well. You asked about a split funding, and that will be covered when we know about the business case. Do we have any questions? Thank you on that. Thank you for the update. Any questions that we haven't already discussed previously, and not just previous day, but previous meetings? Councillor Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I fully accept this was the Minister's decision, and I fully accept that this is money that sits outside the National Land Transport Fund, this does have an impact on our regional land transport plan. I won't restate everything that I have said this morning because it's all a matter of public record. But we are now in a public meeting, and I just wish to restate that I have prepared a paper that seeks a judicial review of the information that informed the Minister's decision making in this space. The recommendation from us and from Waka Kotahi was that the 4-laning proceed. It was required. We had a business case that said the investment was justified. So this conversation is far from over, and I just wanted to make sure that that was publicly known, that we're not just going to roll over and accept this, that we're going to keep, well, I am, as long as I'm elected, keep fighting to make sure that the needs of Northland are front and centre in the Minister's mind. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to reiterate again that the 4-laning highway is still on the top of our list in terms of roading and for the RTC in Northland, but we understand, and we understand that that government initiative has been removed, but we fully support Waka Kotahi and what they are presently doing in terms of roading improvements, because that is where the funding has been allocated to. Thank you. So Any further questions on the 4-laning or comments? Thank you. I will ask for anybody who is against that motion to put their hand up. No. No. Anne, your hand's still up, but I presume it's a yes. Thank you. So I'm now moving on to item 6.4, Northland Road Safety Update on page 50. And I would like a mover for that, please, to accept that report. David, Councillor Wills, thank you. And a seconder. I will second. Thank you. I will pass on to Ian Creighton-Brown to do any further comments before we ask for questions. As always, we certainly appreciate, Ian, the report. And we'll definitely take it as read. And I'm very interested in any comments you may have to make. Thank you.
It's just doing a audio check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, if I could just take the agenda item as having been read, please, Chair, and also just like to acknowledge Nicole Kokich, who put the agenda item together. What I can update prior to passing on to two other speakers, and one of them is Anne-Marie, our road policing manager for Northland. And also there's another speaker in relation to speed issues. But if I could just update the current road toll across the national figures are 93 fatalities year to date. And of those 93, we've got 51 on local roads, 42 on state highways. Up here in Northland, sadly, our figures have jumped recently up to 6 for the year to date. And of that, 5 of them are on state highways, 1 on local roads. And we've got 2 in the far north, 2 in Whangarei, or the Whangarei district, and 2 in the Kaipara district. But if there's any questions anyone would like to ask, if after the other 2 speakers have presented, that'd be good. But if I could just pass on to Anne-Marie, and Anne-Marie, if are you able to share your screen, or we could read your presentation?
Yep, I'll give it a go.
Thank you.
Everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, cool. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to start off by updating, just a very quick update on oral fluid testing, which has been passed through Parliament. Now, it won't roll out until this time next year. It won't kick off until this time next year, but I just want to give an early heads up, and I can update as things roll out and progress. But it's good news for us in the district where our drug impairment testing is quite high. So in 2023, March, it will kick off with CVST testing, so truck drivers being tested first, and that will be a trial for a couple of months. After that, it will roll out to impairment teams, so our traffic alcohol groups and district impairment groups. And my understanding is that it tests for 25 types of drugs. And it's something I noticed or took note of is that nationally the excess blood alcohol tests were taken and tested for drugs, and of those 53% contained drugs in their system. So those who are drinking are often driving with drugs in their system as well. So it's something we'll watch with interest, and I'll definitely keep you updated as those things roll out. I just wanted to touch on last year and up to this year. in terms of our DSIs or deaths and serious injuries. And I guess the point I wanted to make is that regardless of the time of day, the vehicle driven, the location, these things listed here are the factors that years of research tells us are the greatest contributors to our road toll, or our deaths and serious injuries. And so this is where police focus most of their energies or efforts to make the greatest impact. So while we like to think that it's the idiots on the road that cause the greater carnage, we do know that from Waka Kotahi and internationally that only about 30% of our crashes are caused by risk-taking or intentional risk-taking behaviour, and the rest are otherwise compliant people that have made an error in judgment, which has cost them dearly. So our team needs to be focused on what it is that causes or contributes to the causes of the crashes that we're having. So since, sadly, since I put this together less than 2 weeks ago, that number on the left there has doubled with our recent State Highway 14 Tangatoria crash, and then our more recent Kaio crash where a woman and her daughter were killed. So I just wanted to make the point that this is why we invest in impairment policing and looking at restraints, looking at distractions, phones, things like this, and focusing on speed, because generally speaking, deaths and serious injuries will have one of those, at least one of those contributing factors. So that was just a rationale around how we invest our time with policing. In terms of the this document here is completely draft, and it is yet to go to our wider staff in road policing, which is tomorrow, but I didn't see any harm in sharing it with you, and more than happy for any feedback online or offline later. But it's just and it's only a short term, it's for the first, this is the 2022 plan, but there's just some things that we want to try out, and I thought I'd run it past you. I won't go through every individual point, and if you want to ask about them, you can. But just touching on a few things, the 333 method of operation, so that's around how we deploy our checkpoints. So a longer term one in the earlier evening when people are going home from work or starting to think about going out, and just being aware that our presence is there, and deterrence essentially from drinking and driving or drugs and driving. And then moving to a more mobile model earlier in or later in the evening. So moving around and you know, making it aware, making people feel that our presence is everywhere, because we're in different places around the evening. And then following up with a third one where we have shorter checkpoints. So we're somewhere for 20 minutes, then we move on before the, I guess, the jungle drums start beating, and everybody knows about where we are. So it's just a different way to deploy our resources. I was going to touch a little bit on district road policing days. So that's when we try to ring in everybody. So whether you work in intelligence or CIB or on the front line or in youth services, everybody gets out there and make sure that everybody, you know, there's compliance on our roads with all the things that contribute to deaths and serious injuries. RIDS focus, we've just spoken about that. And then just over on under specific deterrence, it talks about obtaining greater intelligence in terms of risks and locations. It's actually quite difficult to do. So essentially what you find is that the risks don't change. They are state highways, as Ian spoke about. You know, there is state highways, and generally the locations are similar. We do end up creating our own intelligence or risk locations if we, for example, if we went to Parua Bay and sat down the road from the tavern and happened to find some drink drivers or somewhere in the north, then that generates intel that says this is an area of interest. So it's quite an art to get the right intelligence in terms of driver behaviour and risk locations. But that's something we want to work on so that we're deploying effectively and efficiently. I did want to touch on the portfolios. So I'm quite keen to assign ours. Some staff have a bent towards certain things, or they're very, very good or talented in certain areas. And so I want them to have some ownership. Now, this doesn't mean that if they have a portfolio of restraints that they're responsible for all of the district wearing seatbelts. It's more ensuring that our operations or our events or our advertising are all lined up, and that we're ensuring that our performance is where it should be or better. I did want to touch on high risk drivers. Very, very keen to do some work around that, identifying, and often you'll find that it's 20% of the drivers doing 80% of the damage or 80% of the at-risk behaviour type stuff. So with the resource that we have, I'm quite keen to identify who those people are and help them to, you know, improve their driving behaviour, whether that's through licensing, whether it's through training, whether it's through enforcement, whatever it requires to reduce that risk. And I did just want to note, just as with everything in the last few weeks, this has evolved, this plan. So under partners, we've got something there around conducting checkpoints in collaboration with iwi. I've taken that off the most recent draft because to me, on giving it more thought, that's almost deciding without collaborating with iwi what approach we'll have. So we'll go to the one above and explore ways to work with iwi, and we'll let iwi guide us in terms of what is best for Māori in terms of reducing risk. And I think that's about it in terms of what I'll talk to on the plan, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I had to expand my screen just to get see the words. So I just have a look, see if there's any hands up. I don't think there are any hands up. That's a great report. Thank you. And it'd be good to actually have a copy of that plan. If we haven't got it in our report, have we? No.
Would you like the draft, or would you like me to send it to you once it's been finalised?
Once it's been finalised, thanks. I'm sure everybody would appreciate that. That would be awesome. Thank you. Thanks very much. Do I see any questions? Thank you. And thanks again. It's excellent. Thanks. I really like the initiatives. Really interesting listening to the different ways of policing. It's great. Thank you. Anne, you have a question. Oh, yeah.
Gosh, sorry, it took a bit of navigating because I couldn't find how to disconnect me while.
I know, I was the same.
But still, I'll just lower my hand. I don't have a question specifically for Anne-Marie, but that was great, thank you. That report is in the agenda, it's on page 60.
The full report?
Yep.
Okay.
Just in terms of the.
Oh yeah, sorry. But not the final one. We want the final one if we can. Okay. Thank you.
Just in regard to the agenda item specifically, I noticed on page 53, REAP are looking for a community hero. They're looking for a member of the RTC to be the road safety hero. And I'm quite happy to put my hand up to do that if nobody else wants to do that. So that's just an observation. And on page 56, the Kiwi Rap Star rating bands are there in attachment 1. And I know that I've been quite vocal today about the needs of Northland. And I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that page and highlight that the strategic, sorry, I'm being bombarded by flies, so I'm not waving my arms at all of you, it's just flies. The strategic detailed business case that was commissioned to support the 4-laning called Whangarei to Auckland Connecting Northland, that was commissioned by Waka Kotahi, identified that our network is currently receiving a 2- and 3-star safety rating, and has been identified as being at high risk of significant impact. The safety record in this corridor is one of the worst in the country, with a number of poor performing sections. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because these things get lost in time. And if you look at that chart, according to the agency, we should be receiving between a 3 and a 4-star safety rating, and we're currently receiving a 2 or 3. And that chart identifies on undivided roads and divided roads what those safety deficiencies are. So this is an empirical evidence platform that we can use that can help support our campaign for continued investment, and is one of the tools that Waka Kotahi will be considering in the New Zealand Northland, Northland safety package. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And further to that, Anne-Marie, if we could just have a final plan, that would be great. Email to us, that'd be perfect. Thanks, through Victoria or Nikki. And then the other query I have, I was going to bring up the roads, the RTC person to help, but what day is that, Anne-Marie? You've got the 9th to the 15th, but you haven't specified a date for that. Which day would that be? Do you know? The relay?
I'll have to look
Probably
at
the
my
weekend,
calendar.
is it?
I'll have to get back to you, sorry. I'll have to have a
That's
look
all
at
right. I'm keen to be involved, but I couldn't do the later part of the week. So if Anne is available, that would be perfect. Unless, of course, Councillor would like to be involved, we might have to draw straws.
No, thank you though.
Okay.
We should all be involved.
We should all be involved. It just depends on the day. That's all. Thank you.
Well, it's a very strong message that we actually do
Yes.
support road safety.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And Ian, was there something else you wanted to do the last few pages, or you've got another speaker? No, that's it, is it? Okay. So anybody against receiving that report? Thank you. I'm moving on then to item 7.1 on page 64. The driver change, the reviewing the road user charges system, and I would like to mover for that, please. David, thank you. And a second to Anne, thank you. And now I will ask Chris to speak to this, please. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair, before we start on that, just a bit of good news. Nicole Corridge, who helps with the road safety and puts the report together, she got married on Saturday. I think just to set Ian's mind at rest, I won't tell her he's still using her maiden name, but congrats to her, yes.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. I'll also take as that each of the members has read the 77-page submission document and all its content. As you can see, it's fairly comprehensive, Mr. Chair. The Ministry of Transport have included a number of questions, 89 in total, which they were looking to have submitters answer to. Our recommendation is, as you can see under the Regional Transport Committee submission, we have removed what we have considered to be of regional significance. And these, the recommendation is that the RTC, if the members so wish, can put forward a submission on behalf of Northland as the region. It in no way overtakes any submission that any of the local road controlling authorities wish to put in. This will be on behalf of the region, behalf of the RTC. We have included in attachment 3 a recommended body for the submission. With the approval of the RTC, we can put that together as a draft forwarded to each member of the committee. And once all the recommendations have been received or changes, that the staff put it together and the chair approves its submission. Happy to take any questions from them, Mr. Chairman, but a lot of it actually will come from the document itself.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chris.
sir.
And so I just want to reiterate to everybody, page 76, attachment 3, that is what we are discussing, and whether we are happy at the moment to do a draft, and then that will be circulated for our comments and any additions that people ask to be made that we all agree to. And again, the second point is that this is on behalf of the RTC. Individual councils may wish to do their own submission. So I am very keen for this to go in, and I will have to have comments first. Anne, your hand is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wrote a 3-pager on this, so I'm not going to read it all out, but I will send it through to you, Chris. And yes, I did read the 70 odd pages that were on the link. I come back to comments I made earlier that I think this is where we need to have collective oversight of the way the transport task is going to be funded as a country moving forward, instead of isolated snapshots. So we have the Minister on the one hand right now conducting the review that's going to be out in August on some short-term fixes. He's asked the Ministry of Transport to lead a long-term conversation, which is along the 18 months. And then we have this paper here, which unfortunately has come out ahead of the emissions strategy. So my overriding comment, and I did send this off to my colleagues yesterday, is if the principle is that RUC and FED pay for road construction and maintenance, then using this as a vehicle to pay for the government's climate change objective is a serious departure from the legislative principles that underpin this as a taxation instrument in the first instance. It is, what's the word I'm using? It has a higher financial impact for rural and provincial New Zealand than it does for the metro sectors, because it's based on distance travelled. So you'll have people that live in the productivity sector of the country paying more than those who live in the city. And given that this is based on a cost allocation model that is based on a set of physical engineering principles, then I question if this is the appropriate vehicle for the government to use to drive the climate change agenda. The rate, you talked earlier, Chair, about the rate and speed with which people can change to alternative transport modes such as electric vehicles. And we need to be realistic about the ability of New Zealand to meet those objectives in a timely manner. So in all, I think we do need to put a submission in. I'm pretty sure that people like the road controlling authorities and the trucking industry, Mr. Leggett, will put in very, very strong submissions. But ultimately, if we start to charge more for trucks, that means people will start to pay more for the goods and services that they receive. And that will mean the price of fruit and vegetables and home ownership and all of those other things will increase. So I was really surprised that there wasn't a report from Treasury on the productivity impact that this may have sitting alongside it. I do agree we all need to do something about climate change, but I'm not sure this is the way to pay for it. So I'll send that through and you can cherry pick it and use it or not. I'm okay with any of those options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Anne. What I'm going to propose is that, so Anne will send those through. I'm just going back to page 64, and there are 5 recommendations there. Now, I was hoping to take all 5 at once, that you get the chance under recommendation 3, draft submission be circulated to all elected members for comment, and then you get your chance to comment and add your pieces in. Then it would be compiled and in recommendation 4, and then it would come to the Transport Committee Chair for signing off. I would like to take all those 5 recommendations together. Do I have a mover for those, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for those? Thank you, Phil. So is there any further discussion on those recommendations? Sorry, Chris, you've got a question.
Not a
And then
question.
David, and then Councillor Wills.
Sorry, just through the chair, in reply to what Councillor Court has said, if I could direct the members to question 8, that I think that in part covers what Councillor Court has been talking about, and we have indicated in some of the other questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So question 8 on page 670. No, question 8, page 71. No, where's question 8? There it is.
Page 80, you're nearly there.
Nearly there. Got it. So no, I've got page 70. Okay, fine, thank you. And Councillor Wills.
Thanks, Chair. Hey, I'm just wanting to point out the time frame for this. We're talking about a final submission by the 22nd of April. How is that going to work in practice if this is going to be sent out in a draft and then be responded to and then be completed in a final? I'm just asking for guidance, please. That's I think it's number 5 in that recommendation list.
Yep. So my understanding was it would just be circulated. You would put your comments in. I'll just go back to the initial recommendations. You put your comments in, we do a draft, then you get it back again by email to further comment, and then Regional Transport Committee members for final approval, and then we get it in by the 22nd. So we don't have a meeting, we just do it through emails. Are you happy with that?
I'm happy. I'm just considering the timeframes for practical purposes. It almost needs a response by us to the draft by the end of this week, almost to actually
Chris,
get time for review.
What were you expecting, Chris?
Through the chair, any and all replies as soon as we can, fully understanding that that the elected representatives will obviously want input from their councils. But just in support of what the chair said, once we have received all your feedback, that will be placed into one completed submission. The chair will sign that off and it will be submitted. So the sort of bulk of the work is going to be the feedback coming through from the various elected representatives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll try do the best we can, get our comments in and our councillors' comments in. Thank you. Any further comments on that? So anybody against receiving those against approving those 5 recommendations? Thank you. Now that brings us to the end of our program. It's been a long agenda, but very useful discussion. So thank you all very much. And I just want to reiterate the value of having the workshop first. It's a very good program. It's working well. It's good discussion, and it would help us. I hope it will help us, and Councillor Court's comment about being able to be more proactive going forward in terms of our discussions with central government and standing up for Northland. I do believe we're on the right path, Councillor Court. Good, and this is a good way forward. So I hope that it's not a giant step, but it's definitely not a small step. It's a move forward. So thank you very much, and thank you all. And I will close with the closing karakia. No hands up, no comments. Unahia, unahia. Unahia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātea, kia mama, tinakeo, ti tinana, ti waru i te ara tagata. Ko rā e rongo, whakairea a kia ki ronga. Kia tina, tina, hui e